The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds as John Wilson stirred his coffee with a spoon that had seen better days. At 68, his hands bore the marks of a lifetime of hard work. Calloused palms and a few scars from construction sites where he'd started his career nearly 5 decades ago. His wife Martha hummed softly by the sink, washing last night's dishes despite owning 3 dishwashers across their various properties. "Do you think Lily will like something fancy for her anniversary?" Martha asked, drying her hands on a well-worn kitchen towel. Their daughter would be celebrating 15 years of marriage next month, a milestone the Wilsons didn't take lightly. John shrugged his broad shoulders under his favorite flannel shirt, frayed slightly at the collar. "That girl has your taste. Simple but good quality. Nothing flashy." Martha nodded in agreement. At 65, she wore her silver-streaked hair in a practical bob, her face largely untouched by cosmetics save for a dab of drugstore lipstick on special occasions. Today was not such a day. They were just heading downtown to look at some jewelry options. Nothing that required dressing up in her mind. What strangers never guessed when they passed the Wilsons on the street was that this ordinary-looking couple controlled a real estate empire worth over $200 million. They owned apartment buildings in 3 states, several office complexes, and a string of shopping centers that generated more money each month than most people saw in a decade. Their story hadn't begun with wealth. When they married in their early 20s, John worked as a carpenter while Martha taught kindergarten at the local elementary school. They lived in a 1-bedroom apartment where the heat worked only when it wanted to, and they saved every penny they could. While their friends splurged on new cars and fancy vacations, the Wilsons put their money into their first investment, a rundown 4-plex apartment building that no one else seemed to want. "Remember that first building on Maple Street?" Martha asked suddenly, as if reading his thoughts while she pulled on her sensible jacket. "The one where the tenants kept flushing strange things down the toilets?" John chuckled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "How could I forget? I spent every weekend for a year fixing something in that place. But those tenants paid our mortgage. That first building had turned into 2, then 5, then an entire portfolio. John had an eye for undervalued properties, and Martha had a knack for management. They worked 7 days a week for years, John handling maintenance himself long after they could afford to hire help. Martha keeping the books and dealing with tenants with a firm but fair approach that earned their respect. As they climbed into their 10-year-old sedan, not because they couldn't afford better, but because it still runs just fine, Martha reached over to straighten John's collar. Their wealth had grown steadily, but their habits remained unchanged. They still clipped coupons for groceries, still bought clothes on sale, and still lived in the same 4-bedroom house they'd purchased 30 years ago, when their business first began to thrive. "Tom called yesterday," John mentioned as he backed out of the driveway. Their son worked alongside them now, learning the business from the ground up just as they had.
"Says that new development in Henderson is ahead of schedule."
"Might even come in under budget," Martha smiled. The Henderson project was a 50-unit apartment complex designed for working families, with rent set purposely below market to help people get started, just like they once needed help. "That's wonderful. Did you tell him we're still keeping 10 units aside for those families from the shelter program?" John nodded. "He's already working with the social workers on the applications. Their wealth had never changed their values. If anything, having money had only strengthened their commitment to living simply and helping quietly." Few people knew that the Wilsons donated nearly 30% of their annual income to various causes, from housing programs to scholarship funds for first-generation college students. They never allowed their names to be placed on buildings or announced at galas. Their philosophy was simple: do good without fanfare. As they drove downtown toward the high-end shopping district, Martha reviewed their list. Lily and David deserve something special. They've worked so hard getting their medical practice off the ground while raising the kids. John grunted in agreement. Their daughter and son-in-law were both doctors who spent part of each year volunteering in underserved communities. The Wilsons couldn't be prouder, though they suspected their own modest lifestyle had sometimes embarrassed their children during their teenage years. Maybe something with sapphires. Lily always loved blue, Martha suggested as John navigated through traffic. "Whatever you think is best, dear. You know I can't tell a sapphire from a blueberry," he replied with a wink. Despite being worth millions, John could count on one hand the number of times he'd set foot in a high-end jewelry store. His own wedding ring was a simple gold band that had never left his finger in 43 years. They found parking a few blocks from the jewelry district and walked hand in hand down the sidewalk. John in his comfortable jeans and work boots, Martha in her simple dress and sensible shoes. Other pedestrians in designer clothes and expensive accessories breezed past them without a second glance. The Wilsons were used to being invisible this way and rather preferred it. "Ellsworth Jewelers is supposed to be the best," Martha said, checking the small notepad where she'd written recommendations from friends. "Annie from the charity board says they have beautiful pieces." John held the door open for his wife. "Just remember our budget," he teased. This was an old joke between them. The notion of a budget when they could buy the entire store's inventory without denting their net worth. But old habits died hard, and neither of them had ever grown comfortable with extravagant spending. The interior of the store gleamed with polished glass and soft lighting. Display cases held glittering treasures on beds of velvet. Martha's eyes widened slightly, not at the opulence, but at the craftsmanship of certain pieces she spotted from the entrance. "Their work is lovely," she whispered to John, who squeezed her hand in response. A few other customers browsed the displays, all impeccably dressed in clothes that probably cost more than what the Wilsons spent on clothing in a year. John felt slightly out of place but shrugged it off. He'd sat across negotiating tables from billionaires wearing the same flannel shirt. The trick was to never let appearances matter in either direction. As they moved toward a display of necklaces, John noticed a small smudge of dirt on his boot from their garden, where he'd been working that morning before leaving. He made a mental note not to scuff the pristine floors. Martha had already begun studying the jewelry with the same careful attention she gave to property contracts. "These sapphires are exactly what I was imagining," she said softly. Pointing to a delicate necklace with a deep blue stone surrounded by tiny diamonds, John leaned closer to the glass, careful not to touch it with his work-worn hands. "It's pretty. Lily would love that." Neither of them checked the price tag. After decades of success, they knew they could afford whatever would make their daughter happy. More importantly, they'd long ago learned that price and value weren't always related. Some of their most profitable properties had been the least expensive to acquire. Some of their most meaningful possessions were things that cost nothing at all. What the Wilsons didn't notice was the sales associate watching them with increasing wariness. From her vantage point, Vanessa saw only an elderly couple in dated, casual clothes examining some of the store's most expensive pieces. She missed the quiet confidence in their posture, the gentle way they deliberated together, the absence of shock or awe that typically accompanied first-time visitors to Ellsworth. Martha pointed to another display. "Those earrings would match beautifully." John nodded, already picturing their daughter's face when she opened the gift. Lily had her mother's eyes and her father's determination. Despite having parents who could have handed her anything, she'd worked her way through medical school partly on scholarships, refusing to take more than minimal help from them. The anniversary gift wasn't just jewelry. It was recognition of the wonderful human being they'd raised. The Wilsons continued their quiet browsing, unaware that their simple appearance was about to trigger a chain of events that would remind everyone that books should never be judged by their covers, and that wealth, real wealth, often walked around in the most unassuming disguise of all. Vanessa had been working at Ellsworth Jewelers for 3 years now. In that time, she'd learned to spot serious customers from window shoppers within seconds. The couple now examining the sapphire collection didn't fit the store's usual clientele. The man's flannel shirt had a barely visible stain near the bottom button, and his work boots had left faint marks on the freshly polished floor. The woman, though neat and tidy, wore no makeup beyond a hint of lipstick, and her purse was a practical leather one that had seen better days. "Can I help you find something?" Vanessa asked, her professional smile firmly in place despite her doubts. Martha looked up with a warm smile. "Yes, we're looking for an anniversary gift for our daughter and her husband. They've been married 15 years next month." "How lovely," Vanessa replied, though her eyes darted to John's calloused hands as they hovered near the glass case containing necklaces that started at $8,000. "Were you looking for something specific? Perhaps I could show you our more affordable collection near the front." John and Martha exchanged a quick glance. This wasn't the first time they'd been underestimated, but they never took it personally. "We'd like to see the sapphire necklace, please," Martha said kindly. "The one with the diamond halo?" Vanessa hesitated. That particular piece was priced at $22,000. "That's from our premium collection," she explained slowly. "Perhaps I could show you something similar with a lower price point." John's eyebrows rose slightly, but his voice remained steady. "We'd still like to see it if you don't mind." Reluctantly, Vanessa removed the necklace from the display. She placed it on a velvet pad but kept it somewhat closer to herself than to the couple. "This is one of our finest pieces. The center sapphire is 3 carats, sourced from Kashmir, surrounded by VS1 diamonds totaling another 2 carats. Martha leaned forward to examine the craftsmanship. "It's beautiful. The setting is so delicate." While they admired the piece, Vanessa caught the eye of Mr. Reynolds, the store manager, who was watching the interaction with visible concern from across the room. He gave a subtle nod and began making his way over. John noticed the exchange but chose to ignore it. Throughout his business career, he'd learned that sometimes the best negotiating tactic was simply to let others underestimate him. He'd closed multi-million-dollar deals while the other party assumed he couldn't afford the property in question. "Do you have matching earrings?" Martha asked, unaware of the silent communication happening around her. Before Vanessa could answer, Mr. Reynolds arrived at the counter. He was a tall man in his 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Good afternoon," he said smoothly. "Is everything all right here, Vanessa? These customers are interested in the Kashmir sapphire necklace," she replied with emphasis. That didn't go unnoticed by the Wilsons. Mr. Reynolds turned to John and Martha with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's one of our most exclusive pieces. Were you shopping for a special occasion?" Martha, always the more patient of the pair, explained again about their daughter's anniversary. As she spoke, Mr. Reynolds took in John's worn jeans and the scuff marks his boots had left on the floor. His smile remained fixed, but something in his eyes hardened. "I see," he said when Martha finished. "While that particular piece is lovely, I wonder if I might direct you to some of our other collections. We have beautiful items that offer excellent value at more accessible price points." John felt a familiar warmth rising in his chest, not quite anger, but something close to it. He'd built an empire from nothing, created jobs for hundreds of people, and donated millions to charity, all while being underestimated by people who judge books by their covers. "We're interested in this necklace," John said firmly, "and possibly matching earrings if you have them." A flicker of annoyance crossed Mr. Reynolds's face before he could hide it. 2 other customers, a woman in a designer dress and a man in what was clearly a custom suit, had entered the store and were waiting for assistance. The man wore a watch that John recognized as a limited edition timepiece worth at least $60,000. "Perhaps," Mr. Reynolds said, lowering his voice, "you might be more comfortable at Gordon's Jewelry down the street. They offer similar styles at prices that might better suit your situation." Martha's cheeks flushed slightly. In 43 years of marriage, she'd seen her husband face down corporate lawyers, tough construction foremen, and cutthroat developers, but she'd rarely seen anyone speak to them with such thinly veiled condescension. "Our situation?" John repeated, his voice steady but with an edge that had made many business competitors nervous over the years. Mr. Reynolds straightened his already perfect tie. "We cater to a certain clientele at Ellsworth. Our pieces are investments, really. Most of our customers come in with a clear understanding of the luxury market." John looked down at the sapphire necklace still resting on the velvet pad. It was beautiful and would look perfect on their daughter. For a moment he considered simply pulling out his black card and buying it, just to see the look on the manager's face. But that wasn't who the Wilsons were. They had never used their wealth to embarrass others, not even those who might deserve it. "I think we understand perfectly," John said, taking Martha's hand. "Thank you for your time." Martha opened her mouth as if to protest, then closed it again. She knew her husband well enough to recognize when he'd made up his mind. Besides, she wasn't comfortable giving their business to people who judged others so quickly and harshly. Mr. Reynolds nodded, clearly relieved. "Vanessa will show you out. Perhaps Gordon's will have something more suitable for your needs." As Vanessa began carefully returning the necklace to its display, another customer knocked over a small crystal paperweight near the register. The sound of it hitting the floor, though it didn't break, made everyone jump slightly. The distraction gave John and Martha a moment of privacy. We could go to Henderson's on Main Street, Martha whispered. Annie mentioned them too. John nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly at his wife's practical suggestion. That was one of the things he loved most about Martha, how she never dwelled on slights or insults, always moving forward with grace. Vanessa approached them again, her professional smile back in place, though it seemed more strained than before. "If you'll follow me," she said, gesturing toward the door. As they walked through the store, John noticed the wealthy-looking couple who had entered earlier was already being shown items from the same display he and Martha had been viewing. The woman was trying on a diamond bracelet, her wrist already adorned with jewelry that probably cost more than most people's cars. Outside on the sidewalk, the bright afternoon sun felt good after the cool interior of the store. Martha squeezed John's hand. "Well, that was unpleasant," she said with a small laugh. "Remind me to tell Tom to add flannel shirt to his business attire next time he's negotiating that downtown deal." John couldn't help but smile. This was why they'd made it through 43 years of marriage and business partnership, their shared ability to find humor even in uncomfortable situations. "Their loss," he agreed. "Henderson's will probably have better pieces anyway." They had taken just a few steps away from Ellsworth Jewelers when they heard a familiar voice call out behind them. "John? Martha, is that you?" They turned to see Michael Chen hurrying toward them, briefcase in hand and a wide smile on his face. Their financial advisor for the past 15 years, Michael had become more friend than business associate over time. His tailored suit and designer glasses marked him immediately as someone who belonged in this upscale shopping district. "I thought that was you," Michael said as he reached them. "What brings you downtown? Don't tell me you're finally spending some of that money I keep telling you to enjoy." John and Martha exchanged a glance, both thinking the same thing. The next few minutes were about to get very interesting. "We were looking for an anniversary gift for Lily and David," Martha explained. "But we haven't found the right thing yet." Michael glanced at the storefront they'd just exited. "Ellsworth has some beautiful pieces. I just helped another client select an engagement ring there last month. Didn't you find anything you liked?" Before either of them could answer, the door to Ellsworth Jewelers opened, and Mr. Reynolds emerged, apparently heading to the cafe next door. He froze when he spotted the Wilsons still standing nearby, especially when he noticed them chatting with a man whose custom suit and Patek Philippe watch marked him as exactly the type of customer Ellsworth catered to. The moment stretched between them like a taut wire, ready to snap. Michael noticed the strange tension in the air but continued smiling, unaware of what had just transpired inside the jewelry store. "You two look like you've seen a ghost. Everything okay?" Mr. Reynolds seemed frozen in place, his eyes darting between Michael and the Wilsons. The store's open door allowed his conversation to be heard from inside, where Vanessa and the wealthy couple were watching with curious expressions. "We're fine," John said, patting Michael on the shoulder. "Just didn't find what we were looking for." Michael frowned slightly. "That's surprising. Ellsworth has some of the best pieces in the city." He turned toward Mr. Reynolds with a friendly nod. "Hello there. Are you helping my friends find something special? The Wilsons have great taste, though they rarely splurge on themselves." Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat, suddenly looking uncomfortable. We were just discussing some options." "Well, they deserve the best," Michael said enthusiastically, completely missing the undercurrents of the situation, especially after that Henderson development deal finally closed. "What was it, John? 20 million? 25? Martha noticed Mr. Reynolds' eyes widen almost comically. Under different circumstances, she might have found it funny. 22, John replied quietly, wishing Michael would lower his voice. They had always been private about their financial affairs, preferring to blend in rather than stand out. Michael nodded, his expensive watch catching the sunlight. "And that's just one of their smaller projects this year. These two are too modest for their own good. Did you know they've got buildings in 3 states now? The Wilson Property Group is one of the biggest private real estate developers in the region." He turned back to the Wilsons with genuine affection. "I've been telling them for years to enjoy their success a little more, but they'd rather reinvest everything or donate it." The wealthy couple who had been shopping inside had now moved closer to the door, clearly eavesdropping. The woman whispered something to her husband, who nodded with raised eyebrows. Mr. Reynolds had gone slightly pale. Wilson Property Group? He repeated slowly. You're? Those Wilsons. John shifted uncomfortably. This was exactly the kind of attention they preferred to avoid. We should get going, Michael. We've got that meeting at 3. Meeting? What meeting? Michael checked his watch, confused. I thought you were free all afternoon. That's why I suggested we grab coffee when I saw your text about being downtown. He turned to Mr. Reynolds with a conspiratorial smile. I've been trying to get them to upgrade their portfolio with some luxury items. They've earned it, don't you think? Especially after that community center they funded last year. Martha gently touched Michael's arm, trying to steer the conversation away from their finances. How's your daughter doing at college? You mentioned she's studying architecture now? But the damage was done. Mr. Reynolds had undergone a remarkable transformation. His previously dismissive expression had morphed into one of eager hospitality, his eyes now alight with recognition. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, he said, his voice warming considerably. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. If you'd be willing to come back inside, I'd be happy to show you our entire collection personally. He stepped aside, holding the door open with a flourish. We have several pieces I'm sure your daughter would love. John felt a familiar weight in his chest, the same feeling he got whenever people suddenly changed their behavior upon learning about his wealth. He'd experienced it countless times over the years. The contractor who'd dismissed him until seeing the size of his development project, the car salesman who'd ignored him until he paid cash for a luxury vehicle, the maitre d' who'd tried to seat them by the kitchen until someone recognized John's name. Martha glanced at her husband. Reading his expression perfectly after decades together, she knew exactly what he was thinking. Michael, still oblivious to the situation, beamed at Mr. Reynolds. That sounds wonderful. I've actually been meaning to look at your watch collection myself. He turned to John and Martha. You really should see what they have. Lily would love something from here for her anniversary. Inside the store, Vanessa was watching the scene unfold with growing horror as realization dawned. She just escorted out customers who could have bought half the store's inventory without blinking. Worse, they were clearly friends with Michael Chen, who had referred several high-net-worth clients to Ellsworth over the years. The wealthy couple who had been shopping were also watching with interest. The woman whispered to her husband, Isn't Wilson the one who donated that new wing to the children's hospital? Her husband nodded. I think so. I met him at a charity gala last year. Quiet guy, doesn't flash his money around like most people in his position. Mr. Reynolds was still holding the door open expectantly. Please, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, I assure you we value your business. If you'll just come back inside, I'll personally assist you. John looked at the man's eager face, then at the curious onlookers inside the store. This wasn't the first time they'd been in this situation, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. He'd built their business on treating everyone with respect, regardless of appearance or status. It was a principle they'd never compromised on, even as their wealth grew. You know, Michael, John said loud enough for everyone to hear, I think Martha and I will try Henderson's after all. I've heard good things about their customer service. Michael looked confused. But Ellsworth has that beautiful sapphire collection you were interested in, doesn't it? He glanced at Mr. Reynolds. They were looking for something with sapphires, right? Mr. Reynolds nodded quickly. Yes. Our sapphire collection is outstanding. I'd be happy to show you the piece you were looking at earlier, along with the matching earrings. We could even discuss a custom design if you prefer. Martha squeezed John's hand. Unlike her husband, she didn't feel any satisfaction in watching the manager squirm. She only felt a little sad that people could be so quick to judge based on appearances. Thank you, but I think we've made our decision, she said kindly. She turned to Michael. Would you like to join us at Henderson's? We'd love your opinion on what might suit Lily. Michael finally sensed that something was off. He looked between the Wilsons and Mr. Reynolds, noting the tension. Sure, of course. Whatever you prefer. Mr. Reynolds made one last attempt. Perhaps I could offer a special discount? For valued customers like yourselves? His voice had taken on a pleading quality that made John uncomfortable. That won't be necessary, John replied firmly. Have a good day. As they turned to leave, the wealthy couple who had been shopping stepped outside. The woman approached Martha with a warm smile. Excuse me, but did I hear correctly that you're Martha Wilson? From the Wilson Family Foundation? Martha nodded, somewhat surprised. Their charitable foundation used her maiden name, and they rarely publicized their connection to it. "I'm Grace Howard," the woman said. "I serve on the board at Westside Children's Center. Your foundation's grant last year made our new playground possible. The children absolutely love it." She extended her hand. "I've been hoping to meet you to say thank you in person." Martha smiled genuinely as she shook Grace's hand. "That's wonderful to hear. We were happy to help." Grace's husband joined them. "Richard Howard," he introduced himself, shaking both John and Martha's hands. "Your foundation does remarkable work. We'd love to discuss some potential collaboration if you have time." As they chatted, Mr. Reynolds stood in the doorway of Ellsworth Jewelers, watching the exchange with a mixture of regret and disbelief. Inside, Vanessa had moved away from the window, her face burning with embarrassment. Michael, who had finally pieced together what must have happened, gave John a knowing look. "Let me guess. They judged the flannel shirt?" John shrugged, but the slight smile at the corner of his mouth confirmed Michael's suspicion. "When will people learn?" Michael sighed, shaking his head. "Some of my wealthiest clients wear flip-flops to meetings about million-dollar investments, and some of the flashiest dressers can barely make their lease payments." Martha, who had finished her conversation with the Howards, rejoined them. "Grace invited us to their charity gala next month. Seems like a wonderful cause." John nodded, already putting the unpleasant experience at Ellsworth behind him. That was one of his strengths in business and in life. Not dwelling on negative encounters, but moving forward with purpose. "Henderson's is just 2 blocks down," he said. "Should we head that way?" As they walked, leaving Ellsworth Jewelers and its regretful manager behind, Michael couldn't help but chuckle. "You know, in the 15 years I've known you two, I've never seen you use your status to put anyone in their place. Even when they probably deserve it." Martha smiled. "What would be the point? People who judge others based on appearances aren't worth impressing." John squeezed her hand in agreement. After more than 4 decades together, they still shared the same values that had guided them from their first modest apartment to the empire they'd built. Success hadn't changed who they were at heart. A simple couple who believed in hard work, kindness, and judging others by their character rather than their clothes. Behind them, Mr. Reynolds watched them go, the lesson of the day sinking in painfully as he turned to face Vanessa and explain how they'd just lost what could have been one of their most valuable customers. Henderson's Jewelry had none of the pretentious atmosphere of Ellsworth. The store was smaller, the lighting warmer, and the display cases less intimidating. As soon as they walked in, an older gentleman with silver hair and reading glasses approached them with a genuine smile. "Welcome to Henderson's. I'm Robert Henderson. How can I help you folks today?" John immediately liked the man's direct approach. No sizing them up, no glances at their clothes or shoes, just a straightforward greeting. "We're looking for an anniversary gift for our daughter and son-in-law," Martha explained. "Something with sapphires if possible." Robert nodded thoughtfully. 15 years is traditionally crystal, but sapphires are always a beautiful choice. "May I ask what sort of piece you had in mind?" As Martha described what they were looking for, Michael wandered around the store examining various displays. He still seemed a bit flustered by what had happened at Ellsworth, occasionally shaking his head to himself. Robert listened attentively to Martha, then led them to a display case near the back of the store. "These are some of our finest sapphire pieces. Not as extensive a collection as some other stores might have, but each one is hand-selected for quality and craftsmanship." The sapphire necklace he showed them was similar to the one they'd seen at Ellsworth, though the setting was slightly different. Martha's eyes lit up immediately. "This is lovely," she said, leaning closer. "The color is even better than the other one we saw." Robert beamed with pride. "This particular stone comes from Sri Lanka. They produce some of the finest blue sapphires in the world. The clarity on this one is exceptional." While they examined the necklace, the bell above the door jingled, and 2 more customers entered the store. Robert glanced up but didn't rush or try to cut his conversation with the Wilsons short. Instead, he called over his shoulder, "Be with you folks in just a moment," before returning his full attention to John and Martha. "Does it come with matching earrings?" John asked, noting how the blue would complement their daughter's eyes. "It doesn't have a specific matching set, but we have several pairs that would coordinate beautifully." Robert brought out a tray with 3 different options. "Any of these would work well. This pair has a similar cut. This one matches the halo design. And this third option is a bit more understated but has stones from the same source. Martha tried on one of the pairs, turning her head to see how they caught the light. "What do you think, John?" He smiled at his wife. Even after all these years, seeing her try on jewelry was a rare treat. "They look beautiful. Lily has your earlobes, so they'd probably look just as nice on her." Michael had rejoined them by now and was examining a watch display nearby. "Henderson's has quite a collection," he remarked. "I don't know why I haven't visited before." Robert smiled at him. "We've been here 32 years, but we don't advertise much. Most of our business comes from word of mouth." As they continued discussing the jewelry, John noticed how differently they were being treated here compared to Ellsworth. Robert hadn't asked about their budget or steered them toward less expensive items. He'd simply shown them what they asked to see and treated them with respect. "I think the necklace and the second pair of earrings would be perfect," Martha decided. "Lily loves blue, and these aren't too flashy for everyday wear." John nodded in agreement. "We'll take them." If Robert was surprised by their quick decision on items totaling nearly $30,000, he didn't show it. He simply nodded and said, "Excellent choice. Would you like them in separate boxes or presented together?" "Separate, please," Martha replied. "And could you engrave the back of the necklace clasp? Just their initials and the date?" "Of course. We can have that done by tomorrow afternoon if that works for you." As Robert wrote up the order, the other customers in the store were being helped by a younger woman who shared Robert's kind eyes. His daughter, they soon learned. The atmosphere was relaxed and friendly, a stark contrast to the stuffiness of Ellsworth. When it came time to pay, John pulled out his black credit card without fanfare. Robert processed the payment efficiently, treating the transaction as matter-of-factly as if they were buying a coffee. "We'll call you when the engraving is complete," Robert said, handing John the receipt. "It was a pleasure meeting you all." As they left the store, Michael checked his watch. "I've got a client meeting in half an hour, but I have time for a quick coffee if you're interested." They found a small cafe nearby and settled at a table near the window. Michael, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since leaving Henderson's, finally spoke up. "I feel terrible about what happened at Ellsworth. I had no idea they'd treated you that way." John waved his hand dismissively. "Don't worry about it. We've dealt with worse." Still, Michael persisted. "I should have realized something was off. You two aren't exactly the type to walk out of a store without good reason." Martha smiled gently. "It's not your fault, Michael. And in a way, you did us a favor. Now we know where not to shop in the future." Michael shook his head. "The thing is, Reynolds is going to be kicking himself for weeks. The Howards are major clients in this city, and they saw everything. Word is going to spread." John hadn't considered that aspect. He and Martha had always preferred to keep a low profile, focusing on their business and charitable work without seeking recognition. The thought of becoming gossip fodder for the city's elite was unsettling. "Let's hope it blows over quickly," John said, but Michael was already shaking his head. "Trust me, it won't. I've got 3 texts already from people who heard something happened." He held up his phone as evidence. "Grace Howard apparently called her sister right after meeting you, and her sister is married to the head of the Chamber of Commerce." Martha sighed. She'd never understood the appeal of gossip, especially among wealthy circles where who snubbed who stories spread like wildfire. Well, there's nothing we can do about it now. By the time they finished their coffee and said goodbye to Michael, it was late afternoon. As they walked back to their car, John's phone buzzed with a text from their son. "Tom says he just got a strange call from someone at the Downtown Business Association," John told Martha, frowning at his phone. "Apparently they want to feature us in their newsletter." Martha raised her eyebrows. "Because of what happened at the jewelry store? That was barely 2 hours ago." "Seems like it," John replied, still reading. Tom's confused. Says the person mentioned something about celebrating local success stories who give back to the community. Martha linked her arm through her husband's as they walked. Should we tell him what happened? John considered this. Their son had always been proud of his parents' success but shared their preference for privacy. Might as well. He'll hear about it eventually the way things are going. The next morning proved Michael right. The incident at Ellsworth Jewelers had spread through the city's business community like wildfire. The story had grown with each retelling, becoming more dramatic with each version. By lunchtime, the Wilsons had received calls from 3 reporters, their children, and several business associates, all curious about what had happened. This is getting out of hand, John muttered after declining yet another interview request. You'd think people had more important things to talk about than an old couple getting kicked out of a jewelry store. Martha was equally uncomfortable with the attention but tried to find the silver lining. Maybe it will make people think twice about judging others based on appearances. Their daughter Lily called that evening, half amused and half concerned. Mom, Dad, what's this I hear about you being thrown out of Ellsworth Jewelers? My colleague's husband works at First National Bank and he says everyone downtown is talking about it. Martha explained what had happened while John listened, occasionally adding details. When she finished, there was a brief silence on the line. Well, Lily finally said, I can't say I'm surprised about Ellsworth. They've always been snobs, but I am surprised you two are suddenly the talk of the town. How are you handling it? John sighed. We're lying low, hoping it blows over. Your mother and I never wanted to be local celebrities. Lily laughed softly. Maybe this is the universe's way of telling you it's time to stop hiding your light under a bushel, as Grandma used to say. You've done so much good with your success, Dad. Maybe it's okay if people know about it. After they hung up, John and Martha sat in their living room, contemplating their unexpected moment in the spotlight. 4 decades of carefully cultivating privacy had been upended in a single afternoon. Lily might have a point, Martha said thoughtfully. We've always been private about our success because we didn't want to change how people treated us. But maybe by staying so hidden, we've missed chances to influence others for good. John considered this. Maybe. Or maybe we've been able to do more good precisely because we weren't constantly in the spotlight. He reached for his wife's hand. Either way, I have a feeling things are going to be different now. They had no idea just how right he was. 3 weeks passed, and despite the Wilsons' hopes, the story hadn't blown over. If anything, it had taken on a life of its own. What began as gossip in business circles had spread to local social media groups and eventually caught the attention of a popular local news blog, which published an article titled, Appearances Deceive, How a Local Billionaire Couple Were Shown the Door. I'm not even a billionaire, John grumbled over breakfast, scanning the article on his tablet. They could at least get that part right. Martha smiled as she poured more coffee. Is that really the part that bothers you most? John sighed and set the tablet down. No. What bothers me is that we've spent 40 years trying not to be the rich Wilsons, and now that's all anyone sees. The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Martha went to answer it and returned with their 9-year-old grandson Peter and 11-year-old granddaughter Charlotte in tow. Their daughter Lily stood behind them, looking apologetic. Sorry for the early visit, Lily said, giving each of her parents a quick hug. The kids insisted on seeing you after they heard some kids at school talking about their famous grandparents. Charlotte, always the more outspoken of the two, plopped down at the kitchen table. Jimmy Taylor says you're secret billionaires. Are you really? John exchanged an amused glance with Martha. Not exactly, but we've done well enough. Then why do you drive an old car? Peter asked, reaching for a muffin from the plate on the table.
And why doesn't Grandma have diamonds like Mrs. Peterson's mom?
Martha sat down beside her grandson. Because things aren't what make people happy, sweetie. Grandpa and I found that out a long time ago. Lily joined them at the table. I tried explaining to them about the jewelry store incident, but I thought you might do a better job. John considered how to explain the situation to his grandchildren in a way they'd understand. These moments were precious teaching opportunities, chances to pass on values that mattered far more than money. How about we go for a drive? He suggested. There's something I'd like to show you. 30 minutes later, they parked outside a rundown apartment building in the older part of the city. Despite its age, the building was clean and well-maintained, with fresh paint and neatly kept flower boxes in the windows. This is where Grandma and I lived when we first got married, John explained as they all gazed up at the modest structure. We had 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and furniture we found at yard sales. You were poor? Charlotte asked, her eyes wide with surprise. Martha laughed softly. We weren't poor, honey. We were just starting out. Your grandpa worked as a carpenter then, and I was a kindergarten teacher. This building is special to us, John continued. It's where we learned to save and plan. It's where we dreamed about buying our first property. He pointed to a small fourplex across the street. That was it right there. It needed lots of work, but we fixed it up ourselves on weekends. Peter squinted at the buildings, clearly trying to reconcile these humble beginnings with the rumors he'd heard. But how did you get rich from that? One step at a time, John replied. We saved what we earned, lived simply, and invested carefully. Over many years, one building became 2, then 5, then many more. Lily, who had heard the story many times before, added, "The important thing is that Grandma and Grandpa never changed who they were, no matter how successful they became." Charlotte was still puzzling it out. "So why did the jewelry store people kick you out if you had enough money to buy stuff there?" "Because they judged us by how we looked, not who we are," Martha explained gently. "They saw Grandpa's old flannel shirt and work boots and decided we couldn't afford their fancy jewelry." "That's not fair," Peter declared with the straightforward justice of a 9-year-old. "No, it's not," John agreed. "And that's the lesson in all this. You should never judge people based on what they wear or what they own. What matters is who they are inside, their character, how they treat others, the choices they make." Charlotte nodded thoughtfully. "Like how you and Grandma still live in your old house even though you could buy a mansion?" Martha smiled. "Exactly. We love our home. It has all our memories and it's just right for us. Why would we need something bigger just to impress people?" As they drove back, John took a different route, passing by the community center they had funded the previous year. From the outside, it looked like any other public building, except for a small plaque by the entrance that read, "Made possible by the Wilson Family Foundation." "We helped build that," John explained. "It has after-school programs for kids, classes for adults learning English, and a free health clinic on weekends." "This is way better than buying a mansion," Charlotte decided. "You can help lots of people this way." By the time they returned home, both children seemed to understand the real story behind their grandparents' sudden fame. It wasn't about wealth or being snubbed at an exclusive store. It was about staying true to your values no matter what. That afternoon, they picked up Lily and David's anniversary gift from Henderson's Jewelry. Robert had done a beautiful job with the engraving, and the presentation boxes were elegant without being flashy. Perfect for the occasion. "Your grandchildren are lucky to have you," Robert said as he handed over the carefully wrapped package. Not many people could turn an unpleasant experience into such a valuable lesson. John was surprised. "How did you know about that?" Robert smiled. "News travels fast in this business, and for what it's worth, Ellsworth has been scrambling to repair their reputation. I heard they've implemented new training for their staff on not judging customers by appearances." Martha raised her eyebrows. "Really? Well, perhaps something good came out of it after all." On their way home, they drove past Ellsworth Jewelers. The store looked the same from the outside, elegant and imposing, but a new sign in the window caught their attention. "All customers welcome. We value your business." John chuckled. "Looks like they learned something too." "Maybe," Martha replied. "Or maybe they're just worried about losing more customers. Either way, it's a start." A week later, they celebrated Lily and David's anniversary with a small family dinner at their home. The sapphire necklace and earrings were a hit, bringing tears to their daughter's eyes. "They're absolutely beautiful," Lily said, admiring her reflection. "But you didn't have to spend so much." "We wanted to," Martha assured her. "You and David work so hard helping others. You deserve something special." As the evening wound down, Lily pulled her parents aside. "I wanted to tell you something. The hospital board approached me yesterday. They're establishing a new community outreach program and want to name it after you two." John immediately began to shake his head. "That's not necessary. I know you don't want the recognition," Lily interrupted gently. "But think about it from another angle. Your story has inspired people. The board chair specifically mentioned how your example, success without forgetting where you came from, perfectly embodies their vision for the program." Martha took her husband's hand. "She has a point, John. Maybe it's time to accept that our story might help others in a different way now." After their guests left, John and Martha sat on their porch swing, a nightly ritual they'd maintained for decades. The neighborhood was quiet, with just the distant sound of children playing in a backyard down the street. "Quite a month," John remarked, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Indeed," Martha agreed. "Not what we expected when we walked into that jewelry store." John smiled in the gathering dusk. "You know what's funny? After all these years of trying to keep our success quiet, it took someone kicking us out of a store to make us reconsider." "Life has strange ways of teaching us lessons," Martha said. "Even at our age. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, rocking gently on the swing. Finally, Martha spoke again. Maybe Lily's right. Maybe it's okay if our story helps others see that success doesn't have to change who you are. That true wealth isn't about what you own or how others see you. John nodded thoughtfully. And maybe it reminds people not to make assumptions about others based on appearances. Heaven knows the world could use more of that lesson. As darkness settled around them, the couple continued rocking on their porch swing, content in the knowledge that while their private life had changed somewhat, their values remained exactly the same. In the end, that was the only thing that truly mattered. Being true to yourself and to the principles that had guided you all along, whether dressed in flannel or finery, whether recognized or anonymous, whether standing inside or outside an exclusive jewelry store on Fifth Avenue.